Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Roda 360. I want to start a series about African professionals abroad. And if you've been following along, thank you so much. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your DMs. This series is a response that has genuinely moved me up. And this particular episode has been sitting on my mind for a long time, especially after my last interview episode, because it's in a personal way, it's harder to navigate, right, than most topics. I want to be clear about something before we begin, actually. This is not a comparison episode. I'm not trying to compare the Western education training to Nigeria. No, I don't believe that there's any grounds for comparison. In fact, I do not have any evidence to support that. I don't think there should be any evidence, right? And frankly, that framing of comparison would even miss the entire point. So this is an honest analysis from someone who has been on both sides of what Nigerian pharmacy training specifically gives you, why those gifts are real and lasting, but somehow underappreciated, and where, the gaps are, because there are specific gaps, right? The specific places where the systems we came through simply did not prepare us for. It simply did not prepare us for systems like these systems where we found ourselves like this. And the gap is not our own failure, right? It's our responsibility, however, to understand it and make something out of it. So let's get into it. I want to start here, and because I think there are tendencies in conversations like this to just rush past, just rush through it, and go to either criticizing the system or even saying some of the strengths quickly. And now I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to rush past, because I need also understand or probably to remember where we're coming from. These strengths deserve to own their own space anyways. Now, the Nigerian pharmacy training gave us a depth of scientific knowledge that we, at least as a person, appreciate so much. It demands some level of mastery of basic and clinical sciences that I genuinely have not encountered or matched anywhere else. From pharmacology, biochemistry, pharmaceutics, medicinal chemistry. We didn't just survey these subjects. They weren't just introduced to us. We went deep in learning them. We memorized mechanisms. We understood. We had to understand the pathways. We were expected to know. We're supposed to know it, not just we're expected to know it, to know why, to know what. When I arrived here and sat in seminars where foundational science was being introduced as new material to some doctoral students, materials that I had covered as an undergraduate many years ago, I understood something important. That the depth of my foundational training was not something that was given everywhere. I understood that some people were just introduced to this thing, while I had to know and understand it. So I started appreciating it as a gift that was specific to where I came from. Secondly, the breadth of clinical exposure in Nigeria was something else. Nigerian pharmacy training exposes you to clinical environments and patient-facing practices in ways that many Western pharmacy programs would not, particularly those with a stronger industry and academic focus. Especially if you're coming to a research-focused institution, they will not do that. Now, in Nigeria, you come out of that training with a genuine understanding of what medicine looks like, especially when resources are constrained, right? When the infrastructure is not perfect, when you have to think clinically, quickly, because the system cannot compensate for the gap, except you want your patient to, just to lose it. While that was a bit uncomfortable, it's not a deficit. It's a form of clinical intelligence that is very valuable. And it's one thing that many of our Western trained peers don't have, and they can't easily acquire. The next one I want to talk about is the work ethic and resilience. I'll say this carefully because I don't want it to sound like I'm supporting difficulty or romanticizing something that was so hard. But there is something that happens to a person who trains in a system with high expectations, a system with limited resources, a system with zero tolerance for making excuses. You couldn't make excuse. I remember one of my senior colleagues would throw out a question. You could be attending to a patient and you should just throw out a question. Rhoda, what is this? And if you didn't know it, it sounded as though you had committed a sin. How do you explain that you didn't know it at that moment? You were expected to know. There was no excuses. There was no excuses for not knowing certain things or certain drug names or certain drug labels or certain mechanism of actions at a particular time. When you were on duty, you were supposed to know everything about that department you were working in that week. You were supposed to know everything. There were no excuses at all. That thing quietly builds a kind of professional resilience that I've watched, that it served Nigerian trained professionals extraordinarily. And it serves them well in environments that are really hard, genuinely hard environments. You know how to work. You know how to keep working even when it's difficult. You know how to find answers when the answer is not handed over, will not be handed over to you. That is not a small thing in a doctoral program. That is the thing that carries you through, especially year 2 and year 3, when everything will feel impossible, when it seems there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Another thing that training gave us was the respect for expertise and authority. The Nigerian academic culture generally would instill a deep respect for knowledge and for those who hold it. So we were trained to take expertise seriously. We were trained to listen carefully. We're told not to speak until we're spoken to or until we had something worth saying. That posture, that environment makes you a careful, rigorous thinker. You couldn't just talk anything at any time. It makes you someone who genuinely engages with literature rather than skimming through it. You had to understand it. You had to understand it as though you're going to teach someone the following day. It makes you someone who takes the knowledge seriously. Now, I want you to hold on to those 4 things, because when we get into the gaps, which I'll share now, I don't want you to think that I'm criticizing the system, right? Because I've just mentioned the good things about it and what it has taught us. Those things are yours. They go with you wherever you go. They are not up for revision. They are not up for revision at all. Now, let's look at some honest gaps that those trainings had or left in us. Because while we're talking about the good things, we also have to talk about some of the gaps. We'll not call them the bad things, but some of the gaps that system created in us. Some of the gaps that we need to find out before or while we are making a career choice, while we are traveling abroad or pivoting from one career to another, while we are making, different professional choices. And I want to be specific because being vague would not help anybody, right? So number one, critical thinking. I don't think we had a lot of critical thinking. It was a practice, but it was not a skill. Here is a distinction I'm drawing. Nigerian training, right, teaches you to think critically about clinical problems. I'm coming from the clinical aspect right now. For example, which drug, which dose, which interaction, which contraindication, who should take, who should not. That is a genuine critical thinking, and it's well developed. But in the West, doctoral students and other academic culture operate differently on a different kind of critical thinking. One that is applied to knowledge itself. So these people that have trained from pharmacy school, from undergraduate medical courses, pharmacy school, and probably medical imaging courses and everything, you understand? They understand the frameworks as to how to apply their knowledge. They understand not just how to apply their knowledge, but also how to produce their knowledge with what they already have. So it's not just about the superficial critical thinking of, okay, what should go with what medication should go with what patient should take what. No, it's now about, okay, what frameworks do we have currently? What standards can we use to produce new knowledge? From that frameworks to the assumptions like underlining the research questions, to the ideological and methodological positioning embedded in a piece of literature. It's why when we begin to develop our research questions and design our research, some of us find it difficult a bit, even if we're coming from a clinically intensive background. We find because we were not trained to actually apply this into ideologies and methodologies. When we were not trained to broadly, like to interrogate the knowledge, this thing, why should it be? Why should it not be that? We're trained to receive the knowledge. We're trained to master it. We're trained to apply it superficially. That is a fundamentally different relationship with knowledge. And you walking into a doctoral program that expects you to challenge, to construct, to reconstruct knowledge, to build knowledge rather than just take it in and apply it as a genuine. See, it's a genuine shock that nobody even prepares you for. I remember the first time supervisor asked me, not what the literature said, but what I thought about what the literature said and what its limitations were. I had an answer about the content. I've read it from, how to read literature review, from the methods, that the results, the discussion, then you go to the introduction, then you come back to the conclusion, and you read the abstract. You know what the paper said, right? I had read everything. I understood it. I did this PowerPoint presentation. I was going to show them that this paper, I've read it very well. This literature, I understand it very well. But I didn't yet have an instinct for the meta level question. That, what do you think about it? You yourself, you've read this, what do you think about? That took time to develop. And I wish that someone had named it before I arrived, or I met someone who explained that to me early on in my first year. Secondly, there's an independent intellectual initiative gap. And this is related to the first gap, yeah, but it's a bit distinct. Nigerian training is largely, and I say this with utmost respect and with full understanding of why it was built this way, right? It's largely a transmission model. The professor has the knowledge from decades ago. You receive that knowledge, you master it, you reproduce it, and reproduce it accurately. We know how to cram and pour it in the exam. We pass A levels. Excellence is now measured by how well you absorb and replicate. Here, the academic culture is almost the opposite. Your supervisor does not have the answer to your research question. Nobody does. And that's why it's a research question, right? You are expected to generate direction. You're expected to propose these approaches. You're expected to identify problems. You're expected to bring your supervisor a version of the answer, right? Rather than coming to your supervisor for one. So when you come to your supervisor, say, "Hey, this one, you're as if you're looking for answers from them." They'll be looking at you like you are supposed to be bringing us a version that at least we can supervise. You know, that inversion from receiver to a generator, not generator like light. I mean, generator of knowledge. You know, that difference is one of the most disorienting transitions in the entire doctoral journey for an African trained professional. Because it looks from the outside it looks like a lack of initiative or confidence. And it's why many of our peers look at us as though we know no book. But we know book. We're just trying to adjust, right? We're just trying to be a generator instead of actually putting initiative. And this is a trained orientation to learning that is genuinely excellent for what it was designed for. And that is what a doctoral environment, a doctoral group requires of you. Another thing is communication disagreement upward. In Nigeria, professional and academic culture, disagreeing with a superior, let's say a professor, a supervisor, or a clinical colleague, you'll lose your job. You will lose your position there. We all know that. This disagreement has to be navigated with extra care. Because, I mean, we all know the repercussions. Even if the professor himself or the director himself does not deal with you directly, he has boys, he has people, you know, he has his own flying monkeys that would indirectly deal with you. There are people that have been in master's program for more than 4 to 5 years just because they had a disagreement with their supervisors. However, in the Western culture, the directness with which their culture expects you to push back questions and disagree in writings, in meetings, in seminars, can feel uncomfortable if you're coming from Africa. It can feel like a violation of something important. I've watched brilliant Nigerian professionals stay silent in rooms where they had the best insight in the building. In fact, it happened to me. I had the opportunity to talk about my research. I couldn't. I just felt it was not the time. I just felt maybe I was going to appear arrogant or I was going to appear out of place. I kept quiet and that opportunity passed. It's not because these Nigerian professionals do not have, the exposure. It's not as if they don't have the thought or they didn't think about, that idea in the meeting. But it's because expressing it directly to someone, to a senior, felt like a sin, like I said before, a transgression that our training has specifically warned us against. That silence is interpreted in the Western spaces as absence of ideas, because really nobody will enter your brain to know what you want to say and say it for you. But we all know it's not absence of ideas, right? It's a cultural navigation that nobody is reading correctly, including sometimes you that is watching and listening to me. Another gap, networking. We do not know how to network. We are bad at networking. In Nigerian professional culture, relationships are deeply valued. But the specific Western academic or professional version of networking, like going to conferences, introducing yourself to someone senior who maybe whose work you admire. I just sent someone on LinkedIn, a senior person in my area of research. I just send the person a LinkedIn message now, hoping he will respond. If he responds, oh, nice. If he doesn't respond, it's still okay. It's okay. I think for the person to know that they have an admirer in this part of the world, if he responds, who knows what may come out of, that this networking I have started this morning. Following up by email when you meet someone for the first time and you maybe you exchange an email, following up, maintaining a relationship with someone you've met once. See, this thing I'm talking about, it's not just to everybody, even including myself. As I'm saying it to myself. You see, this maintaining relationships with someone you've met once. I need to learn it more. This lack of networking, this inability to actually follow up on communications and, maintaining this relationship is a particular social technology that most professionals were never really or explicitly taught. We were taught that excellence will speak for itself, that working hard and producing good results would naturally be recognized, which is a good thing. We're also taught that drawing attention to yourself was somewhat unseemly. And this drawing attention to yourself it's even happening here. It's called tall poppy syndrome here. However, all these things, they were good lessons. However, the world is changing in such a way that if nobody knows that you're doing something, how can you prove the value of what you're doing? In the Western academic spaces, that instinct, however nice, however respectable it looks, is professionally costly. The people who get the opportunity are often not the most excellent. They are often not the best in the room, but they are the most visible. People know them. People can put a face to their research. For instance, people can put a face to their product. People can put a voice, right, to their design or to their study. Learning how to be visible or deliberately, intentionally visible without feeling like you're performing or showing off is a specific skill that African professionals have to consciously develop. Nobody told me that before. Nobody told me that I needed to grow. Nobody told me that I needed this networking skill. But somehow I got to find out that, look, Omo, you can't continue to hide. Can't continue to hide at all. You can't continue to hide. People must put value to your name. People must put value to your certificates, to what you can do. Another thing is writing for an academic audience. We're trying to write for an academic audience, but not as much. I touched this on one of our series overview, but I want to go deeper here because it's more specific than people realize. It's not about technical writing. It's not about writing for content creation. It's not about grammar or even vocabulary. The African trained professionals are typically excellent at both. We know how to do these things. But it's about the rhetorical structure, the specific way that Western academic writing makes an argument, positioning the thesis, the way evidence is marshaled, if I can use that word, the hedging language, the acknowledgement of counter arguments or supportive arguments, the particular rhythm of introduction, literature reviews, methodology, results, discussion. This is a genre that, with its own rules, and those rules are not universal. They are particular to a certain context, to certain cultures. And Nigerian academic writing often reflects a different rhetoric tradition. It's more elaborate, broad in some places, more differential to authority, structured differently at the paragraph level. Neither is wrong, but only one of them gets published in Western journals. Learning how to write in that particular or that specific register, not just correctly, but fluently, is work that takes longer than most people admit. And I pity many of us in doctoral studies because we will need to write, or we will need to write correctly. So after all this yapping, both the good and the gaps from our African academic context. Let me drop this laptop. What do we do with this information? It's okay, Rhoda, why this episode today? You've been yapping for about 27 minutes now. What do you want us to do? I want you to leave this episode feeling encouraged, not discouraged. I don't want you to leave feeling exposed. I do not allow imposter syndrome to start speaking things to you. No. I want you to live prepared. Live prepared. Intentionally. Be brave about it. Name the gaps to yourself before the system names them to you. Before somebody tells you, oh, you're not good enough or you're not confident. Tell yourself, what is that thing or what is that behavior you show that makes you look as though you're not confident or you're not worthy to be in that room. The most disorientating experience I've had in academic spaces so far were the ones where I encountered a gap I had not known was there. It was someone else that pointed it out to me. The ones that I had anticipated were manageable. Awareness is the beginning of preparation. So name them, write them down, discuss them with maybe close family members or even friends or people from your kind of background. Know which ones apply most to your specific situations. Seek out the unwritten frameworks and curriculums. Deliberately ask questions. Person where they ask questions, don't they lost. Every academic environment has a formal curriculum and an informal one. Your lab or your research group has an informal curriculum. Look for it. Look for it because that informal one is in conversations at maybe conference dinners or doctoral student meetups or maybe informal settings with your supervisors, in ways that senior researchers or your supervisors talk about their work. like in casual settings, in the things that supervisors say to their favorite students. If you know your supervisor's favorite student, follow them. I follow too, right? Things that they say to these students that they don't say in official meetings. Go looking for informal curriculums everywhere you go. Ask for it. Build relationships with people 1 or 2 steps ahead who will share it. Up till today, I keep following my supervisors, students who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of me. Yeah. Because all those clinical depths, the scientific rigor, they suffer in our undergraduate days, the resilience, the breadth of exposure. They are not just your history. They are your professional differentiation, right? In environments where many of your peers don't have them. So use them deliberately. Be out there. Let people know you are in depth. Your knowledge about these things is in depth. Make people know say you know this thing. Not they hide yourself. Right? Don't minimize them because they came from a system that doesn't have the same brand recognition as the institution that you are now. Stop minimizing yourself. Give yourself time. Give yourself time. But don't make the adjustment a disease or some form of sickness. These gaps I've described are real. And you can even add more. If you know more, add more in the comment section. They are real. However, they are learnable. There are things that you can relearn. There are skills, at least for me, that you can build on. Every single one of them is a skill that can be developed from the critical interrogation of literature or of knowledge to strategic visibility. Use LinkedIn very well, right? Meet people to academic writing fluency. None of them are fixed traits. They are orientations that can be recalibrated with time, with presence, with intention, with the right input. So give yourself time to develop yourself like that. Don't interpret the adjustment period as evidence that maybe you don't belong. No, it's not like that. That's some imposter syndrome talking to you. That period is evidence that you are doing something genuinely hard from a starting point that is genuinely different, not inferior. You are not different. And you being here is a difference that would help you navigate your asset very well. So I want to close with something that sits beyond personal. African academic institutions, specifically Nigerian institutions, because that's where I come from. Our institutions are producing professionals of genuine excellence. The evidence is in every hospital, every pharmacy, every research lab, every doctoral program in the world where Nigerian professionals are doing significant work. And if you're a non-Nigerian watching me or listening to me and you don't know any Nigerian doing any doctoral work or professional work in any setting, look at your setting where you might not be at the right place, because that's not an accident. That is the output of a system that takes knowledge seriously and demands mastery. The gaps I've described today are not an indictment of that system. They are a reflection of the fact that no single system can prepare you for what every other system provides or obtains. So when you move between systems, the responsibility for identifying and bridging the gaps falls to you, not to the institution you're moving from or the one you're moving to. What I hope this episode does is to give you a head start on bridging that gap, So the first time you encounter that gap, it will not be a surprise. If you're in the system already, you know how to adjust yourself and strategically become visible. It's a known terrain that you've already started mapping, right? If you're watching this, you're already mapping that terrain. Because I've come to believe that after navigating all of this, the African professional who arrives in a Western academic space with full awareness of both what they bring and what they need to build, that person is not at a disadvantage at all. Instead, over time, they are at a profound advantage because they are operating with a level of self-awareness and intentionality that most of their peers who have only ever known one system do not have. That awareness is yours. That awareness is yours now. So use it well. Be out there. Talk about you. Talk about your professional life. Talk about the rigorosity. However, adjust yourself to fit into those rooms. So, we've said it all. If you have some, add to the comment section. We said for both the love side of it and the gap side of it. However, I want to know which gap hits you the closest. Which one are you navigating right now? Or which someone had named for you earlier? Write me in the comment section or in my DMs. And if you're watching this before you make that move abroad, save this episode. You need it. Come back to it probably after your first 3 to 6 months. I think you'll find that it lands differently once you're inside the experience. And share this with fellow African professionals who are preparing to make this journey, because this is the conversation we should be having with each other before we leave, not just while we are inside or not just when we've made those mistakes. So please subscribe to my channel, please, and like, share, follow me, because next in this series, we are going somewhere even more personal and what it actually feels like to be the only African in the room. It's the lived experience, my experience. My name is Rhoda, and this is Rhoda 360. 360 degrees of inspiration, insights, and impact. The full 360. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.